It is good to be reminded of the faithfulness of God and the promises of God. It's the power of going into God's Word. It's the power of just taking moments to reflect, to pause. And today, before we jump into the sermon, we are going to take a moment to just recognize and honor someone. Last Sunday, the senior hires took a moment to honor Nick, who has shifted into a new position here at the church. And they took some time to speak over him, to encourage, to reflect back, and also to fill his office with about 280 balloons. I don't know, some of you are here who are a part of that. It was interesting. And so this coming Tuesday, the middle schoolers are going to have the same opportunity. So back in 2017, actually a little bit before July of 2017, I think it was the previous year, I went and visited Nick at U of M's campus and at a coffee shop. And I asked him, I said, hey, what are you planning to do with your life? What are your desires? What is your heart? What do you like doing? And as he described it, I said, you do realize that is a shepherding reality. That is a pastoral role that you just described to me. Now, it was true that he had described those things, but I also had a motive going in there too, because I was there to ask him to pray about coming here as the student pastor. And I caught him off guard that day, and he prayed, and almost 8 years later, we sit here today having these thoughts before us. And he's faithfully served the middle school and the high school, and then our young adults as well. And so this morning, what I wanted to do is just to take a few moments for you to share. You see Nick up here to pray, sometimes to preach, and we'll be talking about his role. The beautiful thing is he's not going anywhere. I guess the beautiful thing, if you like Nick. If you don't, sorry, he's still here. Just the reality of what it is. I'm very thankful that he's staying here, and he's going to be taking an associate-like role here at the church. We're going to further describe that to you. He's going to be really working on some things that will bless the body and bless the community. We're just excited for what that'll be for here, the church and the community. And like I said, we'll describe that later. But for here today, I want to take a few moments. So if you are a student pastor present of Nick's, if you are a parent past or present, that you had a student involved in the middle school or high school, that you would stand and you would just share memory or reflection, thanks, whatever it may be, just to acknowledge and the role that he's had. Because he's still here. We're not doing a goodbye, so we wanted to take a moment and do this. So Kris has a microphone, so I'm just going to ask you to briefly, if that's you, student.
Hi, I'm Tanya Newland, and my daughter Hope has been part of Nick's senior high youth group. She's now a freshman at college and got connected right away with his house. And so I was just really, I've been really blessed that Nick has had such an influence on her life that carried into college. So thank you.
Thanks. Seriously, come on. Carly, right there. All right, don't be shy. Don't make him run all over the place. We just got a few minutes for this.
Like I said last service, I like Nick. I liked him since 2022, and I like the new youth pastor, and he's funny. Ha ha ha. Listen to the first service sermon. Okay.
So I'm Denise Glassburn, and I was the youth leader for middle school youth group when Nick was a young guy. And it was amazing how, at his young age, he understood everything about what God wanted us to do. He challenged Dennis and I because we taught together. He always was the delight of the room, and we had two Nicks. We had Nick. Okay. Yeah, it was Nick and Nick Walker and Nick Meister, and it was a duo. But it was just a joy to see him grow and through this church and then come back. It's an amazing opportunity to be a leader for him, and it's been amazing to see him grow as an adult and be able to be preached by him. So thanks, Nick.
Well, I'm Phil Dietrich, and my kids are older, so they didn't get to be under Nick. But I want to say thanks to Nick because I run the Lighthouse Food Pantry, and hey, we need some extra help. Nick and the youth group will do it. He'll do anything. And he always does it with a great attitude. And during COVID, we did it outside. And he stood outside and he helped, and he always does it without complaining. And we love you, Nick.
I'm Michelle Parks. I've been blessed to have Nick have both Seth and Lily in youth group. The year I was diagnosed with cancer, Seth was on a youth retreat, and we reached out, and Nick was there for my kids during that. He was also there for Seth when he was accepted to U of M, and we found out there was no housing for him. He reached out to people down there. He found Seth an apartment. He's always looked out for my kids and gone, I feel above and beyond just a youth pastor role, and we will always appreciate that about Nick. My family loves Nick, so thank you.
Rocky, while you're over here. Yep.
I just love how warm and welcoming Nick is to the youth. I remember when I was a youth, just a few years ago, how much an impact the youth, the leader in the church really made, and his confidence really shows. So.
Really should just grab a second mic, so we'll do that.
I'm Kristen Summers, and I work at the middle school, and ever since the union started at the middle school, he's come in at 3 o'clock or before and had everything ready for the kids. He doesn't turn the kids away, even if they're not signed up. And I really appreciate that, because there's a lot of middle school kids that really need that. And we appreciate you being at the middle school with the union.
Chance, can you get the red mic as well? It's not coming through. My apologies. All right, Kris, you got to run all the way over here. I tried.
Rewind.
I've had my 3 girls in Nick's youth group, and he has made such a huge impact on their lives. Nick's Bible knowledge is incredible. If you've had a chance to talk with him, and when I'm doing devotions with my kids at home, I homeschool them, and they ask me really hard questions. There's a lot of times I'm like stumped, and I'll say, that is a great one to ask Nick. So I've always really appreciated his Bible knowledge, but he's always challenged the kids in that way, and they have not just grown in fun activities and things, but they've grown in their Bible knowledge so much, and their relationship with Jesus, and how important it is to have a relationship with Jesus and with other people. And the mission trips have made an incredible impact on my kids' lives too. I've always really appreciated that he has made missions such a huge, important part of his ministry here, and it's opened their eyes to a lot of things, and it's exposed them to things that they can't get here in Marshall, and the importance of serving others, and just opening their eyes and lives to other people, and sharing God's impact. And I could really just go on, because Nick is just such a good friend, and he's a good influence, and we've been very fortunate to have him here impacting our kids. So.
Hi, my name's Ariel Luzetter. I've been out of youth group for 3 years, but I was with Nick all through middle school and all through high school, and I just feel like he has totally influenced my faith and has helped me grow and learn even more. And also, it felt like youth group was a place where I felt like I could belong here at the church, and just feeling like building that community, and then coming into church on Sunday after youth group and being like, oh, I can actually sit with these people and feel like I can talk with them and just be around them, and having that community has been really great.
Thank you. Good. So I encourage you to just send them a message, say a thank you, and thank you for those that shared. And if you don't know Isaac, this is Isaac back there, you can wave. Isaac is our new student pastor who's overseeing middle school, high school, and young adults, and really building on a foundation here. And so let's give Nick and praise God for Nick. So. All right, middle school, I'm going to send you guys out of here with Isaac. And so if you're in middle school, if you want to go to the middle school message, you're welcome to. Welcome to stay here as well. He's much funnier than I am, so as has already been said there. So we're going to be in the book of Daniel. You can join me there. If you want to look at the Black Bible in front of you, it's on page 719, and we'll be going into a little bit deeper into the book of Daniel. And the Bible is divided into the Old and New Testament. There's 39 books in the Old Testament. There's 27 in the New. The Old Testament really tells the story of Israel before Jesus. The New Testament tells the story of Jesus and letters to the church, the formation of the church, and this movement forward of the teaching of Jesus, the teaching of Paul, and you find that in the New Testament. Daniel is found in the Old Testament. He is considered a prophet, so when you read anything, you need to know what kind of genre you're reading. Is this informative? Is it poetic? Is it history? And so Daniel is prophetic. There's major prophets and minor prophets in the Old Testament. Daniel is considered a major prophet. A book like Malachi or Nahum is a minor prophet. Not because one is more important than the other, but rather to the length of the writing. And so Daniel is a longer writing, so he's considered a major prophet. Prophets, yes, they in a way foretold the future. They looked into the future, but what they did is they looked at the current reality and they said, these are ways that you're really following God well. These are areas where you need to turn and go a different way. So last week in chapter 1 of Daniel, we looked at him who lived in the 6th century BC. The Babylonians, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, had just taken over Jerusalem. They had taken items out of the temple and taken it back to King Nebuchadnezzar's temple, a place of worship. And they had also taken many Israelite young men, 13 to 17 most likely, and brought them into their culture. They, in a sense, indoctrinated them. They taught them their literature. They changed the names, gave them a different diet, said, basically, forget about your past. This is your future. Daniel and his friends were some of those individuals who were taken into exile. And as we saw last week, they resolved not to defile themselves. They chose not to eat the king's food, to be set apart. And this gave them courage when they faced larger realities. So often what we do is we think, okay, you know what, in this situation, this really isn't a big deal, so maybe I'm not going to choose to obey God in this way. It seems like a small thing, so I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go a different way. And then when the stakes are really high, when it's a big choice, then I will obey God. But what we do is we can compromise in the little things and not be prepared in the big. As I was reflecting on this, I thought about just years ago, I've told you that I spent some time in Nashville in one of the federal housing projects there. And as a 21-year-old kid, there I am with my roommate, Chris. You get to see all sorts of pictures of me years and years ago, half a lifetime ago. I remember moving there, and my whole purpose of going there was to start a youth ministry within the projects that we lived and worked in. There's about 3,000 people that lived in the John Henry Hale homes, and we lived right in the neighborhood there as well. And I remember moving in on the weekend and being so excited about the ministry opportunities. And so I went Monday with Chris and with our mentor who was there to help shape and form the ministry, so ready to go into the neighborhood, go sit with the grandmas on the doorsteps, go play basketball with the kids, just have fun, connect, grow, and develop this ministry. And I remember them saying, hey, that warehouse across the street, what I need you to do is I need you to take this pile over here and put it in a pile over here. And that was Monday. The next day, ready to go into the neighborhood, they said, I want this pile right here to go into that area over there. And so for at least a week, we spent in just a nasty warehouse moving piles and creating other piles. And I was mad. I thought back to my friends who were back home, who were working, who were hanging out with one another, and the enjoyment of summer they were having. And there I was in a warehouse moving piles of junk. What I didn't realize was that those in charge were watching our attitudes. We're checking to see, were we complaining? Were we bitter? Would we do these small things before they entrusted us with larger things, which they eventually did? But I think even more so of Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They had these moments where God was giving them opportunities. And last week, as we began this journey, I asked you a number of questions. And the questions that I asked you last week included, in what ways is God asking you to trust him? What pressures in your life challenge your commitment to honor God? What do you need to ask God for and request from another person? In what ways am I being molded and conformed to the world? And in what ways am I being set apart and transformed by God? And so I paused throughout the time to ask you to consider these questions. Where do I need to trust God? How am I being conformed? How am I being transformed? And I want to encourage you to continue to process these questions today and the days ahead. So in Daniel 2, Daniel hears that Nebuchadnezzar has a bad dream. Nebuchadnezzar has this bad dream. And he calls his magicians, his enchanters, his sorcerers, his astrologers to interpret this dream. And they come before him. And they're like any parent who their child has a bad dream. You're like, tell me about your dream. And Nebuchadnezzar says, no, you tell me what I dreamt and then interpret it. And Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 2, verse 5 says this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. Not a very favorable outcome, right? But, he said, if you tell me your dream, the dream, and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. And so they say there's no way to do this. Only the gods could do it. Verse 12 of chapter 2, this made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and the men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. That is a bad day, right? If you're Daniel and friends, you hear that you have a sentence to be executed. That's a bad reality. So Daniel finds this out. And as we saw last week, that Daniel didn't just demand with his convictions, with his rights, he asked. And again, he asks. He has the favor of Nebuchadnezzar. And so he goes before King Nebuchadnezzar, and he asks, and he says, hey, can I have some time? The king's like, sure. And so Daniel, he goes to his friends. And what do? We see in verse 18 of chapter 2. He urged them to plead for mercy from God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So when you're faced with the reality, a good thing to do is to pray. And many of you do that. You're faced with the reality and you pray. I'm getting ahead of me here, John, just a sec. Is that you are called to pray. Now, not just pray alone. You need to pray with others. I invite you to pray with others. Is that maybe there's something here today that you need to share with someone else. Before you leave, that you need to say, hey, this is the reality that I'm facing. Will you pray for me in this? Maybe that's someone who will be standing up front here. Maybe that's someone in the hub. Maybe you'll text someone later. And I encourage you, if someone asks you to do that, most likely you're going to be like, yeah, I'll pray for you. You may forget it, right? What if you just pause in the moment and you pray for the person? Or what if you follow up this week and just say, hey, how's it going? You shared this with me. I want to check in. Also, if you ask for that prayer from someone, give an update. Some of you remember Vernon and Ethel Hazard. They were amazing people of prayer. And Ethel would be so mad at us. I'm including myself in this because I was guilty. Because she would be praying for something and then never hear what happened. Something would be resolved, and she'd still be praying for it. And she's like, I'm still praying. I want to know. So what if we give these updates? What if we come together in prayer? Daniel prayed with his friends, and God answered that prayer. And Daniel pours out thanksgiving. Now this picture here, this is what the prayer was, is Daniel went before the king, and he says, you know what? This isn't even me doing this. This is God that shared it. And he described to the king his dream. The dream was about this succession of empires. So the head of gold represented Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, the Babylonian Empire. The chest and the arms of silver represented the Persian Empire, which would succeed the Babylonian Empire, which means Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom would fall. The stomach and the thighs of bronze would represent the Greek Empire. Then the legs of iron, the Roman Empire, and then the feet of iron and clay representing divided kingdoms. And in this dream, this stone came flying out and hit the feet, which were made of mixed materials, and the whole statue crumbled. and then a mountain came out of the ground, and it represented God's eternal kingdom. And so Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar his dream, and he interprets it. And in verse 46 of Daniel 2, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. Notice something here is that your God, Nebuchadnezzar's not saying, hey, he's my God, is the God of other gods, so he's greater, he's Lord of kings. So kings still stand and gods are there, Nebuchadnezzar is saying, but hey, I'm going to acknowledge your God did something remarkable. I'm not following that God, but I'm acknowledging this. Verse 48 says, then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, Daniel didn't forget his friends. The king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. So Daniel gets respect and gifts and a promotion. His friends get the promotion, and Daniel is put in charge of the wise men. So everyone lived happily ever after, right? I mean, that's how the story goes. It's, Nebuchadnezzar's like, yep, I'm going to follow your God. Everyone's got their jobs. The credits roll at the end of the movie. Not even close. King Nebuchadnezzar, thinking of this dream of his kingdom crumbling, doubles down. Chapter 3, verse 1 says this, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high, 6 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, this is 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. Okay, this is a huge, huge statue made of all gold. What King Nebuchadnezzar is saying is like, listen, this is my kingdom. This kingdom will stand forever. And then in verse 4, he had it proclaimed, nations and people of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. So everyone is to do this. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, the kazoo, the banjo, the whatever, like you hear this coming, you're to bow down. You're to bow down to the statue. When you hear music, bow down. Conform. Follow after me. I'm the one who is Lord. I am the one who's God. Now for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had previously resolved not to defile. Daniel as well. Daniel was at the royal court, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were here with this pressure to bow down. They had stood strong previously. What were they going to do now? Nebuchadnezzar, he hears that they did not bow down when the music played. And Nebuchadnezzar, because he has respect for them, invites them before him. And Nebuchadnezzar says, is it true? Did you not bow down? Did you not understand the rules that you're to do this? See, it's one thing to make a decision in private. It's one thing to make a stand in private, to stand strong. But there, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are before the king, maybe hearing music. Their friends are watching on what's going to happen. Those who told on them are there too. The furnace is blazing because King Nebuchadnezzar gave them an option and said, you can bow down to the statue, or I have this really nice warm furnace that you're going to be thrown into. You have an option, right? I mean, options are good. Not necessarily this one. It was a bit of a pressure there. So there they stood with pressure to compromise. They had been set apart. They had been standing strong. And they had another situation before them. And the next three verses, verses 16, 17, and 18, are a picture that summarizes courage. Maybe you need courage today. Maybe you need to stand. Verse 16. We go back to verse 16, please. Thank you much. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. But there they stand. Next verse, please. Oh, wow. All right. That's different. Okay. All right. So hopefully you have it in your Bible. Whatever that's going on back there. Verse 17. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. There we go. He's standing in this pressure reality. We don't need to defend ourselves. We're standing here. God can deliver us. He's going to deliver us from you. But if he doesn't, we're not going to serve you. We're not going to bow down. We're not going to conform. We're going to continue to be set apart to stand strong. And someone phrased it this way. I believe that God can, expect that he will, but trust him if he doesn't. I believe that God can, expect that he will, but trust him if he doesn't. Can you say that today? Can I say that today? I mean, this is what they were standing upon, this reality in verses 16, 17, and 18. As we pray, as we fast, as we walk through life in whatever reality we're in, whatever we're facing, can we say these things? Let's start with this first one. I believe that God can. I believe that God can. God is all powerful. He can save. He can deliver us. He's able. God is bigger than that cancer, than that lost job, than that broken marriage, than their friends, than your enemies, than sin, than shame, than the grave. God is bigger than all of these realities. There's another prophet in the Old Testament named Jeremiah. He was facing overwhelming circumstances. And he said this. He said, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. Like, hey, if you created the heavens and the earth, you can solve whatever that situation is that you're facing. That Jeremiah was facing, that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are facing, that you're facing. Nothing is too hard for God. And so maybe for you today, the belief is something that you are walking toward or trying to unpack or trying to understand. Do I believe that God can do all things? Do I believe that God is sovereign? Do I believe this reality? Some of you may be like, yeah, that's the easy part. But the next part might be where you trip up. Do you expect that he will? Do you expect that God will do it? That God's promises are true? That he is faithful as we sang? Do you really expect God to come through? Will God do it? See, what happens in this part is that we may have the situation and we may pray, we may wait, but there comes a point where we start to ask ourselves, is it my time to step in? Is it my time to solve this problem? Is it my time to do this? Because God is not doing what he said he would do. There's a story in the Old Testament, in 1 Samuel. The Philistines are oppressing the Israelites. There's only 2 swords in the entire country. Jonathan, King Saul's son, has one of them. And they're walking along, he and his armor bearer. And they come upon this garrison of 20 soldiers, fully armed. 1 sword, Jonathan, armor bearer, 20 soldiers. And this is what Jonathan says to his young armor bearer. Come, let's go over to that outpost. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. What kind of confidence is that for you? I mean, the word that I trip up on is perhaps, right? That's the thing. If I was the armor bearer, I'd be like, Jonathan, let's have some confidence in this, all right? Let's expect that God will do this. See, Jonathan was walking knowing that God can, and I think Jonathan expected that God would come through. It was just this struggle of this perhaps part, right? this perhaps reality. Wonder in this time, what is it that you are expecting God to do? Or you stopped expecting for him to do? What is that thing? There's a story in John chapter 9, one of my favorite stories in Scripture, where Jesus and his disciples are walking along, and they come upon someone who is born blind. And the disciples say, was it this man's sin or his parents' sin that caused him to be born blind? And Jesus, he says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Now, this is a hard truth. This is a hard reality because it's not about my name. It's not about your name. It is about God's name. This expecting that God will do something is about God's name, trusting that he is good, that I'm going to choose to honor him and follow after him no matter what is happening around me, no matter what the outcome is. And for some of us today, this is our prayer, that you have given up expecting that God will do whatever it is. Maybe this week as you pray and you fast, you will step into this saying, Lord, give me an increased openness and expectancy to your power, to who you are, to your work. But maybe for you, it's that last one. Maybe you believe God can and you're expecting that he will, but this last part, but will I trust him if he doesn't? Or maybe you're far past this. You're hanging on and you're like, this is it. Like I'm about to just walk away from faith, from Jesus, from God, because God didn't come through. I lost that job. That sickness is there. That relationship is gone. That person died. Someone said this, courage believes not only that God is bigger than the opposition, but also better than all the alternatives. Trusting God even when he doesn't deliver us immediately is a hallmark of faith. It is the kind of trust that says, God's plans are better than mine, even when I don't understand them. This is where we truly grow in courage and character. This is where we truly grow in courage and character. Not only that God is bigger than the opposition, but he's better than any solution that I come up with. So I have to expect that he's going to come through. And I'm going to trust him even if he doesn't do what I want him to do. Because in verse 19 of chapter 3, it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, and turbans and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, Certainly, your majesty. And he said, Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Now, many scholars point to this being Jesus or being an angel. Because they say, looks like a son of God or the sons of God. And we have no idea if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that this 4th individual was in the fire. And just as this 4th figure stood with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, we can have confidence that we're not alone in whatever fire we face or we're in. That Jesus is with us. The Spirit of God will not leave us if we're a follower, delivering and sustaining and strengthening us for his glory. In Isaiah 43, it says, Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name, and you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze, for I am the Lord your God. This same God meets us in our fires. When we decide to be set apart, when we decide to stand strong for whatever reality it is that we're in or we're facing, God does something miraculous. God is with us. And I think there's 3 words that can describe what happens in that fire, is that God may choose to deliver, God may choose to sustain, God may choose to strengthen us, or a combination of those 3. That God may say, hey, all right, you're in this fire, I'm going to deliver you from this. For others, you're still in it. For some, it's sustaining. You're in it, I'm going to sustain you. You are going to move through this. For others, it may be strengthening. You're in this, and I'm going to strengthen you through this. Or this combination. So that thing that you're facing, I don't believe at all that God caused it. But God is using it, and he's working in and through you. King Nebuchadnezzar, in verse 26, he approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governor, and the royal advisors crowded around them. And they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor a hair of their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own. We see these 3 individuals trusting and obeying God. What is it before you that you need to trust and obey God for? What is that thing that you are tempted to compromise, to give in, to give up trust, to walk a different path that God is saying, I want you to trust and I want you to obey? The Apostle Paul in Romans, he said, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, not alone, not apart, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego lived this out. They chose not to conform. They were transformed. They tested and approved God's will. And their transformation, their faith in that, their trust, their obedience transformed others. And so as followers of Jesus who are called to be set apart, who are called to take and stand strong in Jesus, for Jesus' name, not for mine, to trust, we are given opportunities every single day. And so this week, I want you to consider, what is that for you? What is that? This week, as you pray, that you would pour out whatever pain that you have or hardship, whatever confession needs to be made, whatever strength needs to be received, that you would listen for God's voice, that you would seek the wisdom of God. And as you fast this week, that you would be reminded that it's not your body that controls you, that it's submitted before the Lord. It's not the outcome. If you have that pressure at school or at work, that you're being tempted to conform to whatever it may be, that it is to honor God in the middle of that. Maybe in a relationship, that patience, our heart alignment with the Lord. Whatever it may be, that you would set that before the Lord. And I wonder even today, that we would find strength to stand firm in faith, to trust, even when that fire seems so overwhelming, to be reminded that you are not alone, to be reminded that the Lord is with you. He's promised not to leave you. So what is that for you? What I'm going to ask you to do here, maybe for you, is taking that stand. It is that movement of saying, God, I trust you. I want to invite our 2 individuals who will be praying, our prayer team, to come forward. Maybe for you, that step is to go see Stella or go see Andrew. Say, hey, would you just pray for me? And maybe you don't even say what the situation is. Or maybe you do. Maybe that's your step of faith. Maybe for you today, your step of faith is to come forward and humbly kneel here. it's an act of coming before the Lord. Everything within you is probably saying, no, I'm just going to stay in my seat. I'm fine. I can pray here. It's true. You can, and you're welcome to. But maybe for you, it is just this coming before the Lord and humbling yourself. So what's going to happen is I'm going to pause, and I'm going to invite you forward. And you're not going to be alone here because I'm going to be praying here. I'm going to kneel here. And I invite you to come forward. It's going to have a moment of pause. And after that, Nick is going to pray over us. And then we're going to sing a song together. And if you're praying here or praying there, you can pray during that entire time. Through the prayer part, it's verbal, through the song that is sung. But we invite you to come forward. We invite you to humbly submit yourself to God, to whatever that fire is. Give that to the Lord. And so, would you come?